Hello and welcome to The Top Story, a podcast with the headlines of the day from our correspondents around the world. I'm Qizhi. Coming up in this edition, a fresh wave of explosions has struck across Lebanon, killing at least 20 people and injuring over 400 others. The US Central Bank has lowered interest rates for the first time in over 4 years with a half percentage point reduction. And Peru has declared a state of emergency in the regions affected by devastating forest fires. We begin in the Middle East. A new wave of explosions has rocked Lebanon as walkie-talkies used by Hezbollah members blew up, along with other telecommunication devices. At least 20 people have died and hundreds have been injured. It came just a day after pagers detonated across the country, killing 12 people and injuring nearly 3,000. Hezbollah is blaming Israel and has vowed retaliation, but Israel has declined to comment. Jonathan Regev has more.
We're speaking of walkie-talkies, we're speaking of radios exploding within cars, solar panels, cell phones, a wide array of devices exploding, and the explosions, at least in some cases, seem to be stronger. At least in a few cases, we're hearing the explosions are bigger. That is why the number of casualties, of victims, seem to be higher at an early stage. The numbers are supposed to rise. As far as Israel is concerned, the comments are nothing, leaving Lebanese, leaving Hezbollah to wonder what exactly is this. Israel would usually be the first suspect, the usual suspect. And apart from that, a very big question that I'm sure everyone in Lebanon is asking is, how did this happen? We were speculating about a shipments of devices, of pagers, which made its way to Lebanon a few months ago and perhaps were dealt with before shipping. Now, many more questions. Why did solar panels detonate? Why did radios in cars detonate? Why did cell phones detonate? A lot of questions in what clearly seems to be a major security breach inside Lebanon.
That's Jonathan Regev in Tel Aviv. Meanwhile, Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has told troops that the military is moving its attention to Hezbollah and must be prepared in the northern regions, where he says the Lebanese group is stronger. In New York, the United Nations General Assembly has adopted a resolution demanding the withdrawal of unlawful Israeli presence from Palestinian territories within 12 months. Jody Jacobs reports from the UN headquarters.
Following 2 days of debate and negotiations, the draft resolution was finally adopted by the UN General Assembly. The United States and Israel voted against the resolution, while the United Kingdom abstained.
Draft resolution A/10/L31/revision 1 is adopted.
The resolution passed by the General Assembly now affirms the July advisory opinion by the International Court of Justice that Israel's occupation of the Palestinian territories and settlements is illegal and should be withdrawn, with the Assembly now placing a time frame on this of 12 months. Wednesday's actions by the General Assembly, while not legally binding, further isolates Israel just days before world leaders gather in New York for the annual UN session. Both Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas are expected to make speeches.
I'm deeply frustrated.
Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has welcomed the resolution, saying international law must be respected.
We fully abide by the decisions of the International Court of Justice. We fully respect also and recognize the need for them to be respected by everybody, the opinions issued by the International Court of Justice, and I will implement any decision of the General Assembly in that regard.
Speaking to reporters, Guterres added his voice to the unfolding situation in Lebanon. This after handheld radios and pagers used by Hezbollah detonated on Tuesday and Wednesday across the country.
I think that what has happened is particularly serious. This event confirms that there is a serious risk of a dramatic escalation in Lebanon, and everything must be done to avoid that escalation.
Final preparations are now well underway here in New York. The Secretary General has appealed to member states for a spirit of compromise as the negotiations for the Summit of the Future enters the final stretch.
That was Jody Jacobs reporting from the United Nations in New York. Turning to the Americas, the U.S. Federal Reserve has cut interest rates for the first time in 4 years. The central bank kicked off its monetary easing cycle with a larger than usual half percentage point reduction. Owen Fairclough breaks down the numbers.
The US economy has been through extraordinary times, first with the COVID-19 pandemic, and the US Central Bank, the Federal Reserve, slashing its main interest rate to zero to ease conditions for consumers to get credit and for businesses to expand. But when pent-up demand began to soar in the wake of that pandemic, inflation started to spiral, and the Fed was forced to raise its interest rates to the highest levels for years to drive down inflation. But the Fed has decided that battle is over now, with inflation close to the Fed's 2% target, and the Fed has decided it's time to cut that main interest rate. Here's the chair of the Fed, Jerome Powell.
In light of the progress on inflation and the balance of risks, at today's meeting, the committee decided to lower the target range for the federal funds rate by a half percentage point to 4.75% to 5%.
But the size of that interest rate cut, a full 0.5%, will fuel concerns among some skeptics that the Fed has left it too late to cut that interest rate and is now acting aggressively to drive that rate down. And they point to certain numbers. Let's take a look at those. The unemployment rate here in the United States stands at 4.2%. Now, it did dip a bit in August, but it's been rising gradually. Also, hiring has slowed down. Both of these factors blamed on that benchmark interest rate by the Fed being so high for so long. And yet the GDP, the economic expansion of the US, is forecast to be around 2.6%. That's the forecast by the International Monetary Fund. So what does this all mean for consumers in the United States, particularly those trying to get on the housing ladder with mortgages at the highest for years? Well, the Fed is thinking that it may continue to cut those interests, that benchmark interest rate gradually through 2025 until it reaches around about 3.5%. That's considered the level at which that rate neither hinders nor accelerates the US economy.
That was Owen Fairclough on the much-anticipated US interest rate cut. Peru has declared a state of emergency in 3 regions affected by devastating forest fires. The blazes have killed at least 16 people in the past 3 months and burned thousands of hectares of land. Experts say that the drought in the country and climate change have intensified the conditions. Dan Collins reports from Lima.
The fires have swept across dry grasslands in the mountains and set trees ablaze in the Amazon. Nearly all of Peru's 24 regions have been impacted by the fires in the last few weeks. Local people and firefighters scrambled to fight the flames with water, but sometimes just tree branches. Fires have already reached Peru's Amazon region, where Air Force helicopters are carrying water to put out the flames.
We've coordinated aircraft to move 3,000 liters of water per trip, and they make 10 trips. In total, we're sending more than 30,000 liters to put out the fires in our Amazon.
Nearly 100 people have been injured and hundreds of domestic animals killed, not to mention an untold amount of wild fauna. Clouds, smoke and wind have impeded the operations of aircraft available to fight fires. Peru's Forest and Wildlife Service says the effects of climate change intensify the conditions to help spread the fire. Wildfires in Peru and across South America come as a prolonged drought has dried the Amazon River to its lowest level in decades. Climate change and dry land lead to widespread fires, which in turn intensifies climate change. It's a destructive loop. Experts say the fires are human-caused. The Amazon rainforest does not burn naturally. Slash and burn methods to clear land for farming purposes have gotten out of control. But unscrupulous land grabbers, emboldened by weakened environmental laws, are also burning wild lands to make way for cattle ranching or agriculture. When the rainforest burns, it's the wildlife and indigenous communities that suffer.
That was Dan Collins reporting on the wildfire in Peru. In South Asia, Sri Lanka heads to the polls this weekend with 38 candidates running in a presidential election on Saturday. The election comes just 2 years after the nation's economic meltdown. Incumbent President Ranil Wickremesinghe is among the 3 frontrunners. Ravinder Bawa has more from Colombo.
Sri Lanka's incumbent President Ranil Wickremesinghe is seeking re-election to the top post with the slogan, Sri Lanka Can.
Let's all work together to further develop our economy over the next 5 years. I ask for your mandate on September the 21st to lead this effort.
On Saturday, Lankans will decide the fate of a 6-time former Prime Minister who is pitching stability and continuity of his government's economic policies to deal with the crisis. Continuing the pitch to build a robust economy to benefit all citizens equally, the leader of the opposition, Sajith Premadasa, is also a strong contender for the post.
We will reduce taxes, increase investments and also stop corruption, which has been deep-rooted.
Challenging the old guard is Anuradha Sanayake with a campaign to weed out corruption and changing the political culture of the country.
To build a prosperous nation, we must eradicate fraud, corruption and waste. As the NPP, we are committed to establishing a governance system free from these vices, ensuring a better future for all.
2 years after the country declared bankruptcy, it is certain that the election results will be determined by economic issues.
So I think prices of food, prices of the daily essentials, prices of, let's say, things like petrol, diesel, those are the things that are going to be on top of the mind of the voters.
This is the first election after the mass protests of 2022, when the protesters forced the former president to flee the country and later resign. Many term this as a significant moment in the history of Sri Lanka's political scenario. Expectations are high and the economic compulsions to fulfill them way heavier.
That is Ravinder Bawa reporting from Sri Lanka. Now, recapping the headlines. A new wave of explosions has ripped through Lebanon, killing at least 20 people and injuring over 400 others. The US Federal Reserve has lowered interest rates for the first time in over 4 years with a bigger than usual cut. And Peru has declared a state of emergency in the regions affected by devastating forest fires. And that's it for this edition of The Top Story, a podcast that brings you world headlines every weekday. For more news in politics, business, sports and culture, you can subscribe to the Beijing Hour, a 1-hour podcast news magazine program. We welcome and appreciate all ratings and reviews. I'm Qi Zhi. Thank you for listening.